So in the past, I've directed a couple of short films, very short films, that have had to do with community leaders making change in their communities. A film that I directed just before Turning Tables was called The Good Fight, and it was about Rahana Dawood, who's a registered physician and also martial artist whose nonprofit organization called Martial Smarts was created to help Muslim women in the GTA learn self-defense, and this was in response to just after the Paris attacks. So that was a short film that pretty much highlighted her nonprofit and her work, and through that she was able to get sponsorship with Puma and did a spot with Cara Delevingne and go on to really make waves with her organization. And that was the film I did just before meeting Josh. And I mean, yeah, other than directing documentary for short form, I work in digital media as well. So that spans from coordinating for virtual reality projects or multimedia presentations, and yeah. So just a brief introduction about me. Josh?
Yeah, my name is Josh. I'm a DJ producer / powwow dancer, and I guess I could start off like how I got into like actually the arts and the movement is when I was younger. I guess I learned how to break dance when I was 12 years old. And then from there, I actually just learned from the momentum, the movement, the dynamics, and then that's when I got into fancy dancing when I was like 16. And my very first time dancing in men's fancy dances actually was at the LU powwow. And then after that, I got into producing music, probably around, say it was 17. I remember my first, my drum machine, it was a Dr. Rhythm. And then after that, years later, like a couple of years later, I bought an actual MPC 1000, and it was like a drum machine sampler where you can sample live sounds and adding into the pad sounds before the native instruments got into like in the mainstream, where the MPC 1000 was very popular at the time in the beginning of like in the early 90s actually. But I was really intrigued by the MPC because it was just so amazing how you can manipulate the sound and make it something unique. But at the time I wasn't really into techno or house. I was really into hip hop music first, and then that's when I got into when I just so happened to see my dad's box of CDs, and one of them was one of my favorite CD that he had in there was Chris Shepherd Volume 2. I think it was like the Pirate Session. And just from there on, listening to that album, that's when I got into like dance music. And then I didn't know what genre, what was it. It was like, for me, it was just dance music because the way it sounded, it was just so amazing. And knowing it you can actually dance to that. And then that's when I got into DJing, when I met my good friend Joey Bergman, Gary Bannon, who also are actually local DJs. But yeah, Gary Bannon's he actually lives in BC now. And he's a really amazing, inspiring DJ producer, and then that's when I got encouraged to get into DJing. And I still remember my first time DJing here in Thunder Bay is at the Black Pirates pub playing actual vinyls, and boy, that first time it really I kind of sucked. I guess everyone in the first time, when you first time DJing, it's gonna sound very wonky in a way. But after that, I got into it, and years later, DJing and then producing, it just really kind of, made a lot of sense to me to just keep continuing with it. So ever since then, it just kept me out of trouble. It kept me going, motivating, and sometimes I will be uninspired, and sometimes I will be inspired. But overall, at the end of the day, the producing and DJing, it is what keeps me very, very happy, and it keeps me very. Knowing that there's many ways you can create music by just speaking to the music to itself. It's like when you create something, you're actually having a conversation with it. So, but yeah, that's the little introduction about my journey as a DJ producer / powwow dancing.
Okay, so I think most of you were, or all of you were there last night to watch the film, but just to give a little refresher, I have the trailer here that I can play for you, and just to give a little outline of what we were thinking we'd talk to you guys about today is, after we give a brief introduction about the film and how it was made, Josh is actually going to show us more of the music production side of things. All the songs that were featured in the film were unreleased songs by Classic Roots. So I got in there at a good time because these songs are absolutely brilliant in terms of defining what PowWow Techno is. And this is this new genre that Josh can also explain later. So we'll get to see a few stems from one of the tracks off the album. And then I was thinking we could talk a bit more about the filmmaking process of this film and how they're basically under the umbrella of mixing media. As a music producer, and I'm a filmmaker, there were a lot of different networks that we had, different skill levels that we had that we have really tapped into and taken advantage of to make this project the best kind of project it can be. And that has shown in forms of virtual reality, a documentary film, a soundtrack album, an impact campaign, and pretty soon a couple of music videos too. So we could talk about these very ambitious plans and more of the, the logistical side of how did we make this happen, what kind of avenues are there for funding in terms of getting these things off the ground, and then we can take any questions. So let's start with the trailer. It's only a minute, so don't worry, you're not seeing the whole film again.
How do I feel when I put it on? It reminds me of back when the native people were traveling in the bush and just visualizing how they were before the settlers came. PowWow Techno, or just techno in general, is quite new to this community. I feel that's important. It's showing that we're still here.
Okay, so that's a little refresher of film.
Great trailer, by the way.
Thanks. Shanik Tana is his name. He's like our go-to guy for like photographs and video edits, all kinds of things. So he's amazing. So yeah, Turning Tables. You guys know what it's about because you've seen it. But it's pretty much a portrait of Joshua DePerry and his journey through music and dance, and how he uses his culture as a way of celebrating who he is and passing that on to the next generation, specifically with Indigenous youth. So his work in community, I think, is something that makes Josh really special, and it was a really great experience to work together on this documentary. We were so blessed to be able to make our premiere at Hot Docs in the spring, and that was next to Thunder Bay. That was our goal, because this is where Josh is based. Both of us are based, and in terms of growing a fan base, it proved to be very helpful in that department. But before we get talking to the film, let's start with the music, because that's really where it started. And Josh is going to talk about one of the tracks that is on the soundtrack called Heritage, and just his experience in collaborating on that track. And
I was always Clint Eastwood. I didn't want to be an Indian.
Let the people drum with your elders, the legends, and these cold minutes. So yeah, that track, that track is actually, gonna be honest with you, it's actually 3 years old. And the develop of it, those two artists, Nimki and Natasha, Natasha's originally from the Quebec area. She's an Inuit, and she is resided in Montreal. And Nimki is actually from Peterborough, Ontario. And how I got them both together is through, of course, nowadays we use social media, the biggest tool on on this planet, where we can take certain samples and put things together and transfer to through emails and whatnot. So, truth be told, is that Nimki and Natasha never met each other, never met, no. And so I actually asked Nimki first because I had his samples and recorded him when we were on tour during the dance performance called The Honoring. It was based on the 1812 war with the British and the Americans and the Haudenosaunee people, where they were fighting the Niagara Falls land. And so we were on that tour, and I just so happens I had an H4n mic recorder with me, where I usually bring it with me everywhere I go because I love collecting samples, collecting music, collecting anything that's inside of me. And then when I was listening to Nimki singing and just practicing, I just kind of thought about it. I thought that vocal, him singing, can really actually sound pretty cool in the techno beat. And I just felt like, okay, maybe I'll ask him first. Before I asked him, in our tradition, when we ask for something from another person, we always give tobacco. So that just means like we're offering something that as a gift and honoring that whatever we're getting off of them, just to pay respect. So I give him tobacco, sema, and ask him if I'd be able to use his vocal into a song that I had an idea for. And Nimki said, yeah, sure, you can do whatever you want. And I'm like, okay, great. And then so I took that sample, and then Natasha, I met her like 3 years ago through social media. She was a big fan of my music as well. So I met her when she was in Toronto for a couple of days and doing a poetry event, and I was listening to her singing in her poetry, and of course I thought of like, hey, will actually sound pretty cool if I combine Nimki's vocal and her vocal together. So I asked her as well, gave her tobacco, and after that, I asked her if I'd be able to take her vocal, and she's like, yes. And then so once I recorded once I recorded her vocal, then I combined those two vocals together, and then the song became magical to it. And this is what it looks like on the screen, as you can see. And the program I use now, it's called Reason. I've been using it since Reason came out back in beginning of the 2000s, but I had the 4.0, but now I have the Reason 9. Reason has been developing a long time, and now you can actually use like wave samples, whatnot. It's almost like having Logic, Ableton, Cubase, and Pro Tools. But now Reason, you'll be able to use wave sounds. And this is what...
Sorry, could you not use wave sounds before?
Yeah, before it was actually, you can use like MIDI files.
Yeah.
MIDI files where you can just only manipulate whatever Reason had into the program itself. But it doesn't have like, before it didn't have like the third parties, it had their own stock plugins, VSTs, where you can use like the synthesizer in there, drums, whatever Reason had at the point. But now after Reason 6, you can actually use third parties now. You can use native instruments from like Complete 9 or Complete 10. And you can use like WAV files, you can record live sounds into the program in Reason now. And so this is what Nimke's voice sounds like. Oh, actually that's the wrong one. So the vocal right there, actually this is actually, I recorded this vocal when we were outside just at a campfire, and I was just sitting there with my recorder mic, just letting it play. But I repeated it afterwards, as you can hear it. It sounds pretty beautiful, eh?
That's a great sound.
And this is... So that's Nimke's voice. I just add like a reverb with like a delay effect to it. And this is my voice right here with like a vocal chant. And of course I use and I add like the kick with it. Clap. Bass line.
Such a dirty bass line.
Men's grass dance sound. And like the impact. Put it all together, sound like this. Tasha's vocals. And then the whole track itself, this is all the plugins to it. And I'll show you what it looks. So this is all the stuff I use just for the track itself. Pretty overwhelming, eh?
It's cool that so all the plugins all come in, like they show you like the...
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
And then like, of course, like this part here, it's like everything like I put together and combine everything, and it sounds like very unique to it. Without like this part here, this is like the hi-hat, like without this this compressor, they call it a side chain, and that's what it sounds like just without it. It's like straight through, and then if you add like the side chain to it, compressor, it just like it compresses everything. Oh. And of course, this is my vocals too, my voice.
You know, when we were kids, we used to play cowboys and Indians.
And where I got that reference from a movie called Thunderheart. It's a 1994 movie, Thunderheart, where Graham Greene, who was actually talking to Val Kilmer about how what's the difference between, you know, from the Indigenous and non-Indigenous people at a powwow, and he was telling how, you know, where, you know, he was explaining about how the traditions is still alive and still, you know, uprising, but the, you know, the settlers, they think of them as enemies, but us people, we want to, you know, embrace and remain harmony, remain, you know, hunter-gatherers, but also try to be, you know, equal with everyone else, because, you know, we wanted to share everything on this land. And my grandpa always said to me one thing is that no matter who you see on the railroad tracks, that person could be your savior, you know. So that's why I put that vocal in there, just because it made me feel like, you know, that's what's very important, where, you know, we can't hate each other, we can't hate different nationality, we gotta stay as one, you know. And we're all here in our own journey, our own direction, and, you know, we may be a different skin color, but we all bleed the same color, you know. So that's what I had to put that in there, because it just makes me feel like more understanding to the song itself, because we like to, you know, keep everything in all and equal and one, because we're here in this together. Yeah. So does anyone have any questions? Yeah.
When do you know to finish this music or this piece that you're composing is done? Do you have any, like, do you think about the time first, that it's going to be 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or like how do you decide about that? The duration of the piece?
Usually what I usually do is that, like, of course, you know, all of us have, you know, we have 2 ears, and, you know, we have our own favorite songs and varied tracks, like our favorite tracks that we always listen to. And one thing I always try to do is that I try to, like, listen to as many tracks that I can possibly listen to, and listen to the structure of it. And once I listen to the structure, okay, like, for example, one track that I'll listen to, a song that's probably, the intro is very long, for about a minute and a half, and then all of a sudden the verse comes in, it'll be another minute and a half, and just listening to different structures and how that producer put that track together, and just listening to it and seeing if my track's gonna be long or it's gonna be short. And once I listen to it, I'll be like, okay, he's gonna extend it with a probably like a 16-bar loop, where he's gonna have it like over 2 minutes. But if I wanted to make it as like the DJ editing, where an actual DJ wants to play the track at a club, I'll extend it to about at least about 7 minutes. For radio play, probably like 3.5 minutes or 4 minutes. And then for the album, probably like 5 or 6 minutes. So that way, you know, it has their, you know, different various where the track itself can, you know, be long or short. But sometimes, as for creating the music, it doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen like within a week. For myself, I try to take my time with it, because if I really, in order to make it in order to create it as I want it to be, I wanted to take my time, and the longest process, I'd say probably like 2.5 weeks to create the track itself, to complete. But this track itself, it's 3 years old. I took so much time to it, and I put a lot of love into it, and I really wanted it to make it, you know, perfection of it. And so it took this track itself. It took me at least 3 months. Yeah, 3 months. Yeah.
And it's really impressive how you do your own mixing also, like with all the effects you put inside. But in the end, for example, in the end, we have to go to a studio to have it mastered. Mm-hmm. Do you work together then with people in a studio, or can you completely also master it by yourself? You don't need any analog equipment to master it, or like?
Well, at the time, currently I am training, self-taught myself how to master. I have books, and I'm learning, just reading them, and how to EQ it, and how to, try to blend in with the kick and the bass line and whatnot. So like I'm just learning as I go along. But before, what I do is like I'll have everything, you know, I'll have everything very raw, and I usually what I do is I decrease the volume to like 8 dB. Mine is 8 dB, and then I'll send it off to a friend of mine who's very expert to master it. But right now, as of like, you know, today, I'm learning as I go along too. I'm learning how to master my own sound, so that way I know it'll sound more unique way that I can actually do everything all the above. So I haven't took any classes, I haven't took anything. I just pretty much just reading books and just self-taught it myself and just learning, just listening to it as well. You know, that's one thing all of us, you know, that's what God gave us these years to, you know, listen and try to make it sound clean and instead of being muddy, you know? Yes.
That actually answered part of my question. I was going to ask if you're still getting your mastering done by Kiefer. It's awesome that you're starting to like do some yourself and like really getting your own unique sound into it, because like you do have a very unique sound as well. So I think that definitely adds to it, because then you're going to have more of your own style to all of it. Another question I had: do you think there'll ever be any Classic Roots hip hop tracks coming out? Special mixtape?
To be honest, I do have my external hard drive, and I have at least about over 200 hip hop beats that never been released.
Oh.
Yeah, so most of them are all very 90s hip hop. Some of them are okay. Of course, I did a little bit of trap sounds, but not too much. But I'm more like the boom bap 90s hip hop guy. But they're still in my little external hard drive, and it can be released anytime. Yeah. Yeah. I can dust them off, and maybe I'll EQ them and master them, and then maybe I'll possibly release them as free downloads.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thought about using visuals when you're eating, or when you're dancing and eating, when you're performing? Some other kind of visuals, maybe on the screen somewhere, or projection mapping?
Yes. Actually, Chrisann and I, we actually actually made a video to it. You can, if you like to explain, if you like. Yeah.
So it's actually last year we had just finished, I guess, principal photography, and one of our best shoots was actually Josh on top of Mount McKay in his full regalia. It was a beautiful day. We had a drone. We had great shots from that. And when I realized that, like, for the film, we're only going to be using that footage in like quick cuts, like musical cuts, I was like, this is devastating. I really want to find a way to use this. And like clockwork, he was going to be performing at the Sony Center in Toronto for a festival called Fall for Dance, and he was going to be DJing and dancing in his regalia. And they were like, we've heard that you guys are making this film. Can we commission you guys to do a background video? We already had the footage at that point. We edited like a 10-minute video loop of all the finest footage we had from up north. So it was a lot of like close-up nature shots, drone shots, slow-mo dancing. It was perfect for me, because I'm like, yes, this is perfectly how we can live. And so Josh has used that a couple times in performances since then. And I guess, do you have any more questions?
Yeah, well, just I'd like to just ask sort of like, what's your process songwriting wise? Like, what, like, I guess you just collect samples, obviously, and then do you kind of like envision bass lines and stuff in your head first, and then kind of go with it, or do you just throw the sample in? Like, what's like your go-to to get started?
Well, of course, I did experience using the MPC 1000 and just listening to other producers out there and knowing how to collect bassline samples, I could say. Usually what I do is I'll listen to a certain song and I'll be like, hey, I really like that bass line. And what I usually do is like, I'll try to manipulate that bass line sound, or any type of bass line, or just any type of sample. I'll try to manipulate it with my own way, and then try to take different samples from people that I know, or even just from like nowadays everyone's using different websites or different ways to collect samples. There's like, of course, a splice. You can actually find like over a million samples on there, and you can just find like, you can pick and choose, find different picks and stuff like that. However, you can create your own bass line through the program itself too. And for myself, I try to do like 50-50, try to balance everything out, so that way I try to create my own way, so that way in the long run I really like to try to create my own way of my own sound bank, I can say.
Yeah.
And then of course I'll record like my friend's guitar, or his bass line, his bass line picks and stuff like that. I'll just call up a friend of mine, or whoever's there that can actually help me out, and try to create this song itself. And that's one thing I always tell everyone too. As a producer, you don't have to do it by yourself. You can always collaborate with anybody you want, because that's what music is about. Like, creating music is that you collaborate as much people as possible and create something unique to it. And a good example is that watching Dr. Dre's documentaries and just hearing what he usually does. He try to like collaborate with as much people and taking certain sounds and certain samples and putting into his tracks in his own unique way. And it's very, very genius of him, so knowing that he can actually create and manipulate that sound and putting into a track that actually can be very, very popular in the end. But yeah, hope that answered your question.
No, that's cool.
Yeah.
I also like to say I really like your sample of like just the outside atmosphere.
Yes.
And it really, because when you have kind of like synthetic sounds like synthesizers and drum machines and stuff,
Yes.
like that adds like a really cool atmosphere. I don't know, it's just really cool.
Yeah, for sure. And the one thing about it is that once you start recording things like anything you want and try to manipulate with the plugins you have and adding like effects to it and just adding different ways of like putting to that song to itself, and then the end of that session, you're gonna realize that one little speck of sound, you'd be like, holy crap, that actually really sounds pretty cool. And you just repeated it and just looping it, and then making it more wider, more breathable with other instruments you can have with it too. And it's all about the layers too as well. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do you have any collaborations in the works or upcoming that you're able to disclose?
At the moment, I am working with a couple of friends of mine. One of them is actually, his name is Blair, and he's part of the label that I'm on, M5 Records, and him and I were actually working on this track together. His sound is very tech house, and mine sounds very more like, housey and techno, of course, but we're collaborating something really good for the next year, and I'm adding some different vocals right now, but at the moment, it's on his laptop, so we're working on like stuff on his laptop, and it's gonna sound pretty cool at the end, next year, yes. Yeah.
Can I just ask, and I know nothing about music and musicians or anything, but you call it PowWow Techno. Mm-hmm. But have you tried collaborating or sampling, whatever it is, other Indigenous groups sort of elsewhere in the world? Just like you brought together some Canadians, mm-hmm. and it just seems to me that your music really lends itself to sort of a global kind of thing to, share that sort of global sound of First Nations.
Yes, I did collaborate with quite a few different tribes and also different Indigenous people as well. One of them is really close to mine. His name is Adrian Harjo and Ascension Harjo. They're amazing singers, amazing dancers. They're from the Six Nation area, and they're both Mohawk. And they were so kind enough to donate some of the samples that they can use in the Mohawk territory, and it's way different powwow songs. Their sound is very different and so unique that I actually played a couple of tracks last night from them. And one thing I like about how they collaborate with me is all I did was I created a beat for them, and they were just harmonizing to the song with it. And then they weren't that expert with techno music or house music. They were just like harmonizing the beat of it, because the beat itself, in our culture, we call it the Made Wagun, the heartbeat of the drum, and we go by the heartbeat, and then you can feel it. And the drum itself, it can be on any different nationality, culture. That beat is always there. That boom, 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 and for them, they were going with the beat and just harmonizing to that song, and at the end of the day of it, it just sounds so cool that they re-recorded it for me, and then it just sounds so perfect that this song is going to be very amazing. Yes. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, well, in different languages, right? And
Yes.
like just bringing in, all kinds of different influences. And I'm thinking of Daniel and Carl and their work in Papua New Guinea, and the lovely sounds you collected, and how it really is kind of global.
Yes.
Right? It's a musical style that lends itself to, anything.
Yes, absolutely. And that's what I always say to everyone. Like, even when you create songs, there's no limit. There's no way of like right or wrong. And that's what I truly believe in, because once you start collaborating with different people and the way their songs are, it just becomes very unique at the end of the track of it. So I try to be open. I try not to be close-minded. I try to be open to any sound, any way of like, this song, this sample or this recording can sound really cool with this track. And I try to like just be open with everyone, because of the song of it, it'll eventually sound so cool that a lot of people are going to dance to it. Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe one more question. I may have missed it, but how did you and Josh meet? Like, so with the documentary, did you meet like beforehand, and then did you approach Josh like already knowing him, or did you approach him with the idea that you wanted to do something with like him or maybe somebody else?
Yeah, going back to stand because this. So Josh and I met actually 3 years ago now on a production called I Lost My Talk, which was commissioned by the National Arts Center. It was a dance film that was based off of the poem I Lost My Talk by Mi'kmaq poet Rita Joe. And that was a project directed by my boss, Barbara Willis-Sweet, who was the executive producer of the film. I was hired as a coordinator for the shoot. Josh was hired as one of the talent, the dancers, and that's where we initially met. And that was a really great experience. That was, 3 years ago now, but it was a year later when I was starting to get that itch of like, I feel like I could make another film, like, what could it possibly be about? And very interesting, unassuming piece of advice that I got from a friend was, sometimes the subject of your next documentary is closer than you think, aka it could be someone you already know. So I went through my Facebook friends list one night, and I was literally like, who's doing some interesting stuff? And it was so timely, because just at the moment, okay, I wanted to ask how because I know it's 1, and I'm not sure if we have a little bit more time, because I wanted to.
We
Oh,
do
yeah,
have time.
yeah.
Some time? Okay. Because I wanted to actually show the music video that was icing on the cake, where I was like, this is the documentary that we have to expand on this. But just to give a little of a preface to that, it was when we met for a coffee, and he showed me the Heritage song just on a pair of really crappy iPhone headphones, and I was like, I know this will sound better. And he said, actually, this DJ that I've been collaborating with, DJ Shub, who's formerly of a Tribe Called Red, he's having his EP release party in a couple weeks, and I'm going to be DJing. Why don't you come through? So I decided that I would, and when I saw Josh DJ, I was like, okay, wow, this is some next level. Is it shut?
Nothing yet.
Oh, I have to shut.
Oh, now it's
There
there.
it is.
Why is it not posted?
Can I just say that I have to make an airport run, so I'm going to be leaving soon.
Yeah. No worries. Basically, I got to see him perform live as a DJ, and I was like, this guy has like some really great potential. I'm really into it. I'm not a techno head or even that much into music. I tried once upon a time, and film is basically where I'm better suited. Anyway, what I was not expecting, however, was later that evening Josh to come out in full regalia and dance up a storm at the Velvet Underground, of all places, in Toronto, which is this really urban, grungy club, and to see that burst of color of his regalia against those like dingy brick walls. First of all, that was like the visual, like kind of inspiration of like, we need to show this again. And then further to that, it was also the way he engaged the crowd into a sound and a visual spectacle that a lot of them had not seen before. So after that, I came across this music video, which when I tell people who haven't yet seen the film, I'm like, you could just watch this, because it's a really great, like, shortened version of Josh's music, and it's a song from DJ Shug featuring the Northern Cree Singers called Indomitable. It was nominated for a Much Music Video Award, and it won at the Native American Music Video Awards, I think, for Best Video. Yeah, so, I need to, it's on here? Okay. directed by Mark Stanley, and again produced for DJ Shub. And yeah, I mean, I feel like it pretty much is self-explanatory in terms of the visual story, wanting to know more behind classic roots and his inspirations. And I have to say, or echo rather, the fact that finding out about his community work was that next level like just made his whole what he's trying to do more dynamic, because it's more than just the art, it's more than just the visuals, it's the legacy that he's creating now too. So that was kind of what we did.
I would say the editing is amazing, like just from everything. Like it was just so cool to see, like from transitioning into to the city and as well as into the countryside too as well. Like just it's just a really great story too as well. The editing is so powerful.
Yeah, I think that was we kept this question in mind of what does it mean to be urban and indigenous, and kind of not only contrasting those two, but more importantly comparing how similar they can be and how harmoniously they work together. So yeah.
I just wanted to say that I really like your approach to combine these things. So this First Nation voices and your techno music, and I think you do it in a very good way to combine this. Mm-hmm. I think there's always a risk to do it like cliché or something like this, and I really like the way you do it, and I always like the way to combine two worlds. Yeah, like analog or digital or old school to new school, or like do this, and this is a good way to create something new, and not to show this world this way and this way separated. You do it good together.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I can add to a comment to Chrisann, is that one thing I when I was doing the music video itself, I was very, very inspired from Shub's music, and he was actually, he was an original member of the Tribe Called Red, and as soon as he went solo, I always joke around with him too. Like I always say, hey man, it's cool that you're doing your own thing, but he produced the Nation to Nation, and where the first album of Tribe Called Red, and particularly when I was inspired from his music, and that's when I got the idea where I wanted to create something similar to that, but with techno and house, So I felt like that was one of my calling of, big thanks to DJ Shub that really inspired me to continue the indigenous sound into dance music, and that's why I will continue and just keep growing and just collaborating as many people out in this world, and I really wanted to, just keep traveling different countries, different places, and finding new people and finding new voices where we're eventually, maybe down the line, I'll collaborate with that artist, So that's my direction of creating PowWow Techno.
I think if there's one thing we want to leave you guys with is just echoing that idea of collaboration and all the different forms that it can take, and just as important as collaboration, is seeking out mentorship, either from DJ Shub and in my case with the experienced editor that I worked with and the cinematographer. There are always people out there, more experienced people, who are willing to help you out and provide mentorship however they can, and then part of what we're both trying to do from what we've been given is to give back as well, and so providing mentorship to kids who are interested in filmmaking or music production or dancing, and that's part of what we're planning to do next for this project. So yeah, thanks you guys.
Before you go, I just want to ask, because you mentioned that you did some VR,
Yes.
and
Oh,
so
yes.
can you just quickly
Okay, I'll
talk
quickly
about
go
that
yeah,
other?
Yeah. Sorry, I know that we're
Since we're at the
end of
Vox Popular Media Arts
Okay,
Festival.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll actually, to echo on your comment about the whole thing of two worlds, that was the concept that I could not get out of my head after seeing this video and seeing him perform in person, and naturally where my brain went at the time, I was very engrossed in the virtual reality community in Toronto, and I wanted to experiment with technology, split screen technology in a 360 space. So we had developed a concept for shooting classic roots on one half of the sphere in an urban venue, playing techno music and on the other half at a powwow. And to have him go seamlessly between the two worlds, in regalia, out of regalia. We had done a demo, which I realize now I could have brought the stuff to show you guys. It was just a demo, 1 minute quick demo, but we ended up getting funding for the film come through, which is why we ended up then pivoting our attentions to the film. And also there was a similar VR project done with a tribe called Red, called Indian City 360, which was, again, it was just envisioning the idea of, I guess, do a tribe called Red still, like, do they call it powwow step? Or that's DJ Shop alone?
I think that's DJ Shop now, alone.
So, yeah, so they did a similar VR project where they had traditional dancers in a concrete space having a dance off with hip hop dancers, and so they kind of did the split 360. So that was how it started in the VR space, and then when we were able to move to the documentary, halfway through filming the documentary is when we got to meet more of the community, and we realized, oh, this actually what he's doing and what we should be doing is focusing on the impact of this film and how we can sustain his community visits and the workshops that he does. So from there we were pivoting to impact producing, which involved a lot of social media collaborations with charity partners. We have a partner called We Matter, which is an Indigenous youth-led multimedia campaign that is home to videos from First Nations youth spreading their message of hope. So on the We Matter website, which I could go to, but I think we're running out of time. It's www.wematter.org. They have, it's a database of First Nations kids from around Canada and beyond, actually. Also with influential Indigenous people like Ashley Collingbull, I think a tribe called Red also did a message. And you can kind of see these video messages. So Classic Roots contributed his video message as well. And when we do go on tour, we're going to be going with video equipment for these kids to be able to shoot their own messages to go online as well. So that's another media aspect of this project. And finally, I guess we also released a soundtrack album,
yes.
Which we kind of pushed out at the same time as our Hot Docs premiere. The Turning Table soundtrack is available on Spotify, Google Play, and iTunes. And it has all the songs that you heard in the film, including Heritage. And yes, finally, we're going back to music videos. So similar to how it started with Indomitable, we're going to be creating a couple of music videos, I think, off of the album. The first one up is going to be a kind of documentary-style music video for one of the tracks called Start the Fire. And that's going to be taking footage from us on tour with these kids and just creating a shorter music video like that. But somewhere down the line, we're thinking maybe animation as well. It's the kind of project that, as you say, it lends itself to a lot of different kinds of collaborations and media and opportunities. So yeah, that's kind of what we've got next.
Well, I want to thank you guys both on behalf of Vox Popular Media Arts, and we hope that this is just a beginning of collaboration with us, because we've been working a lot in 360 VR, experimenting and building collaborations with obviously filmmakers and artists who come here, and working the performance side of things and community side of things, and so be really honored to somehow keep working with you, because I know you're from Northwestern Ontario, so so are we. Well, and beyond, we consider us like really the region, right? And so thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having us.